Book 2 of Metaphysics, Chapter 1. For the advancement of the science under investigation, it is necessary for us, first, to take a review of those points respecting which one ought to doubt in the first instance. But these are whatsoever subjects some speculators have entertained opinions of after a different mode, and whatever, beyond these, may happen to have been overlooked. For it will contribute towards one's object, who wishes to acquire a facility in the gaining of knowledge, to doubt judiciously, for a subsequent acquisition in the way of knowledge is the solution of previous doubts. But when one is ignorant of the bond of a thing, it is not possible for such to loose it. But the perplexity of the intellect makes manifest this assertion respecting the matter in hand. For so far forth as the dianoetic faculty doubts, so far does it undergo something similar to persons loaded with chains. For it is impossible in both cases to advance further. Wherefore it is necessary in the first instance to speculate into all the difficulties involved in the present subject, both on account of these things and also from the fact that they who carry on an investigation without doubting first are similar to persons ignorant where they ought to walk, and in addition to these things, neither can such know whether he has discovered the object of his speculation or not. For the end is not manifest to this speculator, but to one who has previously doubted, in a judicious way it is manifest. But, further, there is a necessity that a person should be better qualified for forming a judgment, who has heard all the reasons, as it were, of adversaries and opposing disputants. Now, the first source of perplexity is concerning those things which we have expressed doubts of in our preface, namely, whether to speculate into causes be the province of one or many sciences, and whether it be the province of this science to discover merely the primary principles of substance, or also to speculate concerning the first principles from which all derive their demonstrations, as, for instance, whether it is possible to affirm and deny one and the same thing at the same time or not, and concerning the other things of such a kind. And if it is the province of this science to be conversant about substance, whether one may be about all, or whether there be many such in existence, and if many, whether all are akin to each other, or it may be proper to style some of them sciences of wisdom, and others of them something else. And this very thing is amongst the necessary points of investigation, whether it should be affirmed that sensible substances exist only, or whether others also subsist in addition to these, and whether there is a genus singly, or a number of genera of substances, according to the opinion of those who introduce both forms and mathematical entities as things intermediate between these and sensibles. Concerning these, therefore, as we have said, an examination must be made, and also concerning substances, whether the speculation extend only to them, or to the essential accidents of these substances. But, in addition to these points, we might inquire in regard of sameness, and diversity, and similarity and dissimilarity, and identity and contrariety, and concerning priority, and subsequence, and all the rest of such things, concerning as many as the dialecticians endeavour to examine, instituting their inquiries from matters merely of opinion. We might, I say, investigate whose province it is to speculate into all of these. Further, may one investigate whatsoever things are essential accidents in these very things, both not only what each of them is, but also whether in truth one be contrary to one, and whether genera are first principles and elements, or those things into which, as being inherent, each thing is divided, and if the genera are so, whether they are such things as are predicated last, or the first concerning individuals, as, for example, whether animal or man be a first principle, and be so rather than a singular. But most especially must we investigate and examine with pains as to whether besides matter there is any absolute cause or not, and whether this is separate or not, and whether it be one or such causes may be many in number, and whether there is anything beside entirety. But I mean by entirety when anything has been predicated of matter, or nothing, or whether this is the case with some things indeed, but not so with others, and what sort of entities such are. Moreover, whether first principles are limited in number, or in species, both those that subsist in formal causes, and those that are in the subject, and whether of things corruptible and incorruptible the principles be the same or different, and whether all are incorruptible, or whether of corruptible things there are corruptible principles. Moreover also, the most difficult of all, and involving the greatest perplexity, is the inquiry whether unity and entity, as the Pythagoreans and Plato used to affirm, be not anything else but the substance of entities, or this be not the case, but that there be some other subject, as Empedocles says harmony is, and a certain other philosopher fire, and another water or air, and whether first principles are universal, or are as the singulars of things, and whether they subsist in capacity or in energy, further, whether they subsist otherwise than according to motion. For also these speculations would furnish much perplexity. But in addition to these points, there remains the inquiry whether numbers and dimensions and figures and points be certain substances or not, and if they are substances, whether they are capable of being separated from sensibles, or be inherent in them. For concerning all of these questions, not only is it difficult successfully to attain unto the truth, but neither is a judicious doubting easy for the reasoning faculties. Chapter 2. In the first place, indeed, therefore, let us institute an inquiry concerning the first assertions which we have made, namely, whether to speculate concerning all kinds of causes be the province of one or many sciences. For how would it be the province of a single science to take cognizance of existing first principles when they are not contrary to each other? But further, in the case of many of the entities, all do not exist in all of them. For in what way is it possible for the principle of motion to be found in things incapable of motion, or that the nature of the good should, if everything which may be essentially good, and by reason of its own nature, is an end, and so a cause, inasmuch as on account of that other things are both produced and exist? But the end and the final cause are an end of any action, and all things in the act of doing are attended with motion. Therefore, in things incapable of motion, it would not be possible that this should exist as the first principle, or that there be therein any essential good. Wherefore also, in mathematics, nothing is demonstrated through this cause, nor is there any demonstration for the reason that a thing is better or worse. But neither does any mathematician make mention at all of any such thing whatsoever. Therefore, for this reason, certain of the sophists, as for example Aristippus, regarded these sciences with disdain. For in the other arts, even the mechanical ones themselves, as in those of carpentry and shoemaking, he said that wherefore a thing is better or worse could be declared in every respect, but that the mathematical sciences make no account concerning things good and evil. But truly, if there are, at least, many sciences of causes and different sciences of a different first principle, which of these must be said to be the one under investigation, or whom of those that are in possession of them shall we pronounce scientifically informed, particularly in the matter under inquiry? For in the same subject is it possible that all the modes of causes exist, as, for example, of a house, the origin of the principle of motion is from art and the builder, and the final cause is the work, but the matter is earth and stones, and the form is the definition. From the distinctions, therefore, laid down by us originally as to which of the sciences we ought to denominate wisdom, is involved a reason for further styling each thus. For as far as a science is most qualified for the preeminence and for superiority over the rest, and so far as it is just that as servants the rest of the sciences should not contradict, so far such is a science of the end and of the good. For the rest of things are on account of this, but as far as wisdom has been defined a science of first causes, and of that which is especially capable of being scientifically known, so far such would be a science of substance. For, seeing that persons may acquire the same knowledge by many methods, we say that he rather understands a thing who makes known by its being what that thing is, than by its not being. And of these themselves, one in preference to another, and particularly he who knows what a thing is, and not he who knows the quantity or the quality of a thing, or what it is by nature fitted for in the way of action or of passion. Further, in the case of other things, the understanding each of those subjects concerning which there are demonstrations, we think then to have an existence when we may understand what a thing is. For instance, what the squaring of a right-lined figure is, that it is the finding of a mean proportional. In like manner is it in the case of the rest. But with regard to generations, and actions, and every kind of change, we are in a way of understanding each, when we understand the first principle of motion, and this is different and in opposition to the end. Wherefore it would appear to belong to the department of a different science to investigate each of these causes. But truly, also, with regard to demonstrative first principles, whether they belong to one science or more is a question open to doubt. But I term demonstrative even those common opinions from which all derive their demonstrations, for instance, that everything must needs be either an affirmation or negation, and that it is impossible for the same thing to be and not to be at the same time, and whatsoever other such propositions there are. It is, I say, a question open to doubt whether there be one science of these and of substance, or a different one, and, if not one, whether it is necessary to denominate as such the science under investigation. Therefore, it would not then appear reasonable, indeed, that it should be the province of one science. For why, in preference, should the perception concerning these peculiarly belong to geometry rather than to any other science whatsoever? If, therefore, in like manner, truly it belongs to any whatsoever, but it does not admit of belonging to all the sciences, as neither is it the peculiarity of the rest, so neither is it the province of that science which makes known the substances to investigate concerning these. But, at the same time also, in what way will it be the science of these? For what each of these happens to be, we also now know. The rest of the arts, therefore, employ them as things known. But if there be a demonstrative science concerning them, it will be necessary that there be a certain subject genus, and that some of these indeed should be passive properties, and others axioms. For concerning all things it is impossible that there should be a demonstration. For demonstration must needs be composed of certain principles, and be conversant respecting some thing, and the demonstration of some things. Wherefore it happens that there is one particular genus of all things that are being demonstrated, for all the demonstrative sciences employ axioms. But truly, if there be a science on substance different from the one concerning these, which of them is by nature fitted to be more sovereign and prior? For especially and universally the principles of all things are the axioms. And if this is not the part of the philosopher, whose else will it be to speculate into the truth and falsehood regarding these? And upon the whole, whether of all substances is there one science or more? If indeed, therefore, there is not one science of such, what sort of substance must we consider as the subject matter of this science of ontology? But that there should be one science of all substances is not reasonable, for there would be one demonstrative science concerning all things that are essential accidents, if every demonstrative science in respect of a certain subject speculates into essential accidents from general opinions. Respecting them the same genus, it is the province of the same science to investigate the essential accidents from these same general opinions. For an examination respecting the wherefore belongs to one science, and to one respecting those elements whereof a thing consists, whether both investigations belong to the same or a different science. Wherefore, the like will take place in regard of accidents, whether these will investigate them, or one of those. But, further, might we examine whether the speculation is confined only to substances, or is also concerning the accidents in these. But I say, for example, if a solid be a certain substance, and lines and surfaces, whether it be the province of the same science to take cognizance of these things, and of the accidents of each genus about which the mathematical sciences demonstrate, or if it be the province of a different one. For if, indeed, of the same there would be a certain demonstrative science, and that the science of substance, but of the essence, or formal cause, there does not appear to be a demonstration. But if of a different science, what will be the science that speculates about the accidents of substance? For this would be altogether difficult to render an account of. Further, also, whether must we say that there are sensible substances only, or also, besides these, others, and whether do the genera of these substances happen to subsist singly, or are they more numerous, as, for instance, they who speak both of forms and media between forms, and things sensible concerning which, they say, are conversant the mathematical sciences. As to the assertion, then, indeed, that we have made, namely, that forms are causes and substances absolutely subsisting, it has been declared in the earliest of our disquisitions concerning these. But as these inquiries in many ways are clogged with difficulties, it would be no less absurd the assertion that there are indeed certain natures besides those which are in the heavens, and that these are the same with things sensible, except that the former are, indeed, eternal, and the latter corruptible. For they speak of the existence of ideal man, and ideal horse, and ideal health, but say nothing else in regard of these, acting in a way similar to those who affirm the existence of the gods, no doubt, but in the shape of men. For neither did these latter constitute aught, save eternal men, nor do the former make species anything else, but eternal sensibles. But further, if in addition also to forms and sensibles any will set down things intermediate, he will be involved in many doubts. For it is evident that in like manner there will be lines, and each of the other genera, besides also them that are sensible. Wherefore, since astrology is one of these, there will also be a certain heaven besides the sensible heaven, and a certain other sun and moon, and so with the rest, in like manner, of the bodies that are situated in the heavens. Although, how need one place confidence in such statements as these? For neither is it reasonable that this ideal heaven should be incapable of motion, but also that it should be capable of motion is altogether impossible. In like manner also is it the case concerning the objects whereof optical science treats, and that of harmonics in mathematics. For also it is impossible that these should have a subsistence different from sensibles through the same causes. For if things sensible and senses have an intermediate subsistence, it is manifest also that there will be animals which will be media between them, and things corruptible. But one would doubt also concerning what sort of entities it is necessary for these sciences to investigate. For if geodesy will differ from geometry in this only, that one is conversant about things which we perceive by the senses, but the other about things that are not cognizant by sense, it is manifest that besides the medicinal science, and besides each of the rest, there will be a certain science intermediate between the healing art itself and this particular art of medicine, although indeed how is this possible? For also would there be, in such a case, certain salubrious qualities in addition to those that are sensible, and to the salubrious itself. But at the same time, neither is this true, that geodesy is conversant about sensible magnitudes, and those that are corruptible. For it would fall into decay when they were in process of being destroyed. But truly, neither will astronomy be conversant about sensible magnitude, nor about yon heaven. For neither are the lines that fall under the cognizance of the senses the same as the geometrician describes them. For not of the things that are perceived by the senses is in this way strictly straight or round. For the circle touches the rule not in a point, but as Protagoras was accustomed to say in his refutation of the geometricians. Neither are the motions and the evolutions of the heavens similar to those about which astrology has formed its systems, nor have the symbols the same nature with the stars. But there are some persons who say that these reputed media between forms and sensibles are not indeed separable from sensibles, at least, but inherent in them. And to enumerate all the impossibilities attendant upon these statements would require a more copious discourse, but even it will be sufficient to speculate thus much on this point. For neither is it reasonable that this should be so in the case of these merely, but it is evident that it would be possible also for forms to subsist in sensibles, for both of these are results of the same process of reasoning. But further, must there needs be two solids in the same place, and these mathematical entities must needs not be things incapable of motion, seeing that they, at least, subsist in sensibles that are being moved. And in short, on what account will any one lay down their having a subsistence indeed, and a subsistence in sensibles? For the same absurdities, with the things that have been previously spoken, will ensue. For there will be a certain heaven in addition to the heaven we see, except that it will not be separate, but in the same place, which is still more absurd. Chapter 3. Now, respecting these points, much doubt therefore prevails, namely, how it is necessary by forming one's opinion thereupon to attain unto the truth, and likewise, respecting first principles, whether it is requisite to consider the genera as elements and first principles, or in preference those things from which, as inherent, each first thing consists. As, for example, the elements and first principles of voice appear to be those things from which all voices are composed primarily, but not the voice in common. And we say that those things are elements of figures, the demonstrations of which are inherent in the demonstrations either of all or of the greater part of other things. But further, both some in affirming that there are many elements of bodies, and others that there is one, of which they are composed, and from which they consist, assert these to be the first principles, as, for example, Empedocles asserts that fire and water and the elements subsisting along with these are those from which, as being inherent, entities derive their existence. But he does not speak of these as the genera of entities. And in addition to these statements, we may subjoin the remark that if any one wishes to contemplate the nature of the rest of things, as for example a bed, of what parts it consists, and how those parts are put together, in that case he is acquainted with the nature of it. From these reasons, therefore, it would appear that first principles would not be the genera of entities, but so far forth as we obtain a knowledge of each thing by means of the definition, and so far as first principles are the genera of definitions, it is necessary also that first principles be the genera of things capable of definition. And likewise, if to acquire the science of the forms according to which entities are denominated is to acquire the science of entities themselves, in this case the genera of the forms are first principles, but those also who affirm that the elements of entities are unity or entity, or the great and the little, appear to employ these as genera. But neither, truly, in both cases is it possible, at least, to affirm also that they are first principles. For, indeed, of substance there is one reason, or formal principle. Different, however, will be the definition through the genera, and that which declares the entities whereof, as inherent, a thing consists. If also, most especially, in addition to these things, the genera are first principles, whether is it necessary to regard the first of the genera to be principles, or the lowest that are predicated of individuals? For this also is involved in doubt. For if, indeed, it is requisite that universals are first principles in a more eminent degree, it is evident that the topmost genera will be first principles, for these are predicated of all things. Therefore, the first principles of entities will be as numerous as the first genera, so that unity and entity will be first principles and substances, for these especially are predicated of all entities. But it is not possible that there should be one genus of entities, or that unity or entity should be such. For it is necessary, indeed, that the differences of each genus both exist, and that each should be one. But it is impossible either for the species to be predicated about the proper differences of the genus, or for the genus to subsist independent of the species of itself. Wherefore, if unity or entity be a genus, neither will entity or unity constitute any difference. But, doubtless, unless there be genera, there will not be first principles, since genera are first principles. Further also, media that are comprehended along with the differences will be genera as far as to individuals, but now this appears to be the case with some and not with others. And further, in addition to these things, we may add that the differences are rather first principles than the genera. But if these also are first principles become infinite, so to speak, and this is especially the case if one should constitute the first genus a first principle. But truly, if also the one rather be that which is principle, and if one be a thing that is indivisible, and everything that is indivisible is so, either according to quantity or according to species, and if that which is according to species have a prior subsistence, and the genera are more divisible into species, one would be predicated last, for man is not a genus of certain particular men. Further, of those things wherein the prior and subsequent are inherent, it is not possible that what is predicated of them would be anything different from these. For instance, if a duad be the first of numbers, there will not be any number different from the species of numbers, and in like manner, rather, will there be figures in addition to the species of figures. But if this is not the case in regard of these, hardly at least will there be genera of other things in addition to the species, for of these there seem especially to be genera. But in individuals there is not one thing that is prior and another that is subsequent. Further, where one thing is better and another worse, that which is better always is prior, so that none of these could be a genus. From these statements, indeed, therefore, it appears that those things that are predicated of individuals are first principles rather than the genera. But again, how, on the other hand, it is necessary to regard these as first principles, it would not be easy to express. For it is requisite that there should be a first principle and a cause exclusive of the things of which there is a first principle, and that it should be capable of subsisting in a condition of separation therefrom. But as to the existence of some such thing besides the singular, why should one make a supposition to this effect, except that it is predicated universally, and of all things? But if, indeed, this is done on this account, in such a case universals are to be set down as first principles in a more eminent degree, so that the first genera would be principles. Chapter 4. But a doubt closely connected with the foregoing is one which, of all, is both the most difficult and the most requisite to examine into, concerning which our treatise at present is immediately occupied. For if there is not anything besides singulars, and if singulars are infinite, how is it possible to be in possession of a science of things that are infinite? For as far as there is something that is one and the same, and as far as there is something that is universal, so far do we attain a knowledge of all things. But, doubtless, if this be necessary, and if there must needs be something in addition to singulars, it would be requisite that there be genera in addition to singulars, whether they are the lowest or the highest. But that this is impossible, we have ourselves just now expressed a doubt. But, further, if most especially there is something besides the entire, when anything has been predicated concerning matter, whether, if there be a certain form, must there needs be something universal in addition to some, and not in addition to other things, or is there nothing universal besides singulars? If then there is nothing universal besides singulars, there would not be anything that is cognizable by the mind, but all things would fall beneath the notice of the senses, and there would not be a scientific knowledge of anything, unless one would assert the exercise of the senses to be science. Further, would there be nothing eternal or immovable, for all things sensible are in a process of corruption and are in motion. But, truly, if there is, at least, nothing that is eternal, neither is it a thing possible that there should be generation. For there must needs be something, namely, that which is being produced, and wherefrom it is produced, and of these the last must be ingenerable, if both the progress of successive productions is to stop at all, and if generation from nonentity should be a thing that is impossible. But, moreover, on the supposition of such things being in existence as generation and motion, there must needs be a limit likewise, for neither is any motion infinite, but of every motion is there an end. But that cannot be produced which it is impossible could have been produced. But that which has been produced must needs exist when first it has been produced. But, further, if matter be an existence from the fact of its being ingenerable, still it is much more reasonable that substance should have a subsistence when that is generated so as to have a being. For if neither substance nor matter shall have an existence, neither will there be anything at all in existence. But if this be impossible, there must needs be something in addition to the entire, namely, the form and species. Yet if, on the other hand, any one will establish this dogma, a doubt presents itself, both in the case of what things one should make this assertion, and in the case of what one should not. For that this is not possible in the case of all is evident. For we would not posit existence of any particular house in addition to certain houses. But, in addition to the foregoing points, we may subjoin the inquiry, whether will there be one substance of all things, for instance, of men? Now, this is absurd, for all things are not one of which the substance is one, but are many and different. This, however, also is an unreasonable statement, and at the same time also, how would matter become each of these, and how is the entire both of these? But, further, respecting first principles, we would also entertain this particular doubt. For if, indeed, they are one in species, not will there be that is one in number, nor will actual unity or entity have any existence. And how would scientific knowledge be in existence unless there was a certain one in all things? But, truly, if they are one in number, each of the first principles also will be one, and not, as in the case of sensibles, one principle of one thing, and another of another, as, for instance, of this syllable, when it is the same in species. The first principles also are the same in species, for these likewise are different in number. And if this be not the case, but if the first principles of entities are one in number, there will not be in existence anything else besides the elements. For to speak of one in number, or of the singular, makes no difference, for so we speak of the singular as one in number, and of the universal as that which is common to these. Just therefore does the case stand, as if the elements of voice should be limited in number, all the letters necessarily must be in number as many as the elements, since neither two nor more than two of them would be the same. Section 1. But a doubt of no less difficulty has been overlooked, both by modern investigators and by our predecessors, namely, as to whether the first principles of things corruptible and of things incorruptible be the same or different. For if indeed they are the same, how is it the case that some things are incorruptible and others corruptible, and from what cause does this difference arise? Those of the Hesiodic school, and all as many as are theologians, fix their thoughts only upon the probable as it appeared to themselves, but they have treated us with disdain. For, seeing that they make the first principles gods, and to have been produced from gods, whatsoever did not taste of the nectar and ambrosia they say are mortal, palpably speaking of these denominations as expressive of things that are known to themselves. Respecting, however, the actual adducing of these causes, they have spoken beyond our comprehension. For if, indeed, the immortals partake of these for the sake of pleasure, the nectar and ambrosia are, in no respect, the causes of their existence. And if these are the causes of their existence, how would they be eternal, when thus requiring sustenance? But respecting those fabulous systems of philosophy, it is not worth one's while considering them with seriousness. But from those who make assertions by demonstration, it is necessary to ascertain in our inquiries why, forsooth, if entities are from the same source, some of them are in their nature eternal, and why others of these entities are subject to decay. But inasmuch as they neither mention a cause of this, and as it is not reasonable that the case should be so, it is manifest that the first principles of these would not be the same, nor would there be the same causes of them. For also, one whom any person would suppose to speak particularly consistent with himself, namely Empedocles, has likewise experienced the same difficulty. For he indeed is for establishing discord, which is a first principle in his system, as a certain cause of corruption. Nevertheless, this would seem, however, also to produce entities that are beyond the one. For from this are produced all the other works of creation, except the deity. The following at least are the words of Empedocles. Quote, from which are all things, as many as were, and are, and shall be after. And trees therefrom have blossomed, and men and women, and beasts and birds, and water-fed fishes, and even the long-lived gods. Close quote. And the subsistence of all things independent of these is manifest. For unless discord were inherent in things, all things would have been one, as he says, for when they would have come together, then last in the conglomeration would stand discord. Wherefore also it happens to him, in his system, that the deity, who is supremely happy, should be less prudent than the rest of beings, for he does not know all the elements, for he is not in possession of discord. But the knowledge of the like is through the like. Quote, for indeed, says he, by earth we see earth, and by water, water, and ether divine by ether, and through fire the ruinous fire, and by concord, concord, and by gloomy discord, discord. Close quote. But to return to the point from whence our discourse digressed, this, at all events, is evident, that it happens, according to the theory of Empedocles, that discord is no more the cause of corruption than of existence, and in like manner that neither is harmony a cause of existence more than of corruption. For while collecting things into unity, it is a cause of corruption to other things. And at the same time also he mentions no cause of the actual transmutation, save that the thing is thus constituted by nature to take place. Mark his words, quote, "But when mighty discord was nourished in the members, and rose up to the honours of deified time, who, holding the sway over them alternately, had, in the end, surpassed the ample objects of God's adjuration." As if indeed it were a thing necessary that a change should take place. But he does not bring to light any necessary cause. But nevertheless, thus much at least he only asserts consistently, for he does not constitute some entities corruptible, and others incorruptible, but all corruptible, except the elements. But the source of perplexity now mentioned is this: why, if entities spring from the same source, some of them are incorruptible, and some of them are not so? That, therefore, the first principles of things would not be the same, let this much suffice to have been spoken. But if the first principles of things be different, one matter of doubt indeed is, whether these also will be incorruptible or corruptible. For if indeed they are corruptible, it is manifest that it is requisite that these also should spring from certain entities. For all things perish into those from whence they derive their being. Wherefore it happens that to principles there are other first principles that are prior. But this is impossible, both on the supposition of the progression being stationary at some stage of its progress, and on the supposition of its going on to infinity. And, moreover, how will things perishable subsist, if the first principles will be destroyed? But if these principles are imperishable, why indeed from these that are things imperishable will arise those that are perishable? But from the others, those that are imperishable. For this is not reasonable, but either is impossible or requires for its establishment much rational support. And further, neither has any one attempted to enumerate different ones, but speculators assign the same first principles of all things, the first subject of doubt. However, they entertain slightly regarding it as something trifling. Section 2. But also the most difficult point of all to examine into, and the most necessary for the discovery of truth, is whether entity and unity are substances of entities, and whether each of them, not being anything else, this is unity, and that is entity, or whether it is necessary to investigate what, at length, unity and entity are, as if another nature were the subject to these. For some truly in that way, and some in this, suppose their nature to be disposed. For Plato, indeed, and the Pythagoreans do not regard entity as anything different from unity, but that this is their nature, that it should be the same thing, for the substance to be one, and to be a certain entity. But amongst natural philosophers, Empedocles, for instance, as if conducting the inquiry to that which is more known, says that unity is entity. For he would seem to affirm that this is harmony, at least this is a cause in his system of unity being found in all things. But others say that fire, and some that air is this unity and entity, from whence that entities both arise and are produced. So in like manner is it the case also with those who lay down the existence of more elements than these. For it is likewise necessary for these to reckon unity and entity such things as whatever, at least, they affirm first principles to be. But it happens, unless one will set down the existence of unity and entity as a certain substance, that not any of the rest of the universals will have any subsistence, for these are universal preeminently above all. But if unity itself be not some particular thing, nor entity itself, much less will there be any of the other things that will have a subsistence, except those denominated singulars. But further, on the supposition of unity not being a substance, it is evident that neither would number have a subsistence, as a certain nature that has been separated from entities. For number constitutes the monad, but the monad is the same as some certain unit. But truly, if at least actual unity and actual entity be a certain particular thing, it is necessary that the substance of that thing be entity and unity. For it is not any different thing that is universally predicated about them, but these very same things. But doubtless, if actual entity and actual unity, at least, shall have any existence, much doubt will arise how there will subsist anything different from these. Now, I mean, how there will be more entities in existence than one. For anything different from entity has no existence. Wherefore, according to the theory of Parmenides, it must needs happen that all entities are one, and that this one constitutes entity. But in both cases there is a difficulty. For even on the supposition whether unity, doubtless, be not substance, or whether any actual unity have a subsistence, it is impossible for number to be substance. But if indeed then it has not a subsistence, it hath been previously stated why. But if it has, the same doubt presents itself respecting entity also. For from what will there be another one besides the one itself? For must not that necessarily be not one? For all entities are either one or many, each of which is one. Further, if unity itself be indivisible, according indeed to the axiom of Zeno, nothing would there be having a subsistence. For that which neither when added nor subtracted makes anything greater or less, he affirms this not to belong to the category of entities, because entity is manifestly magnitude, and if it is magnitude it is corporeal, for this in every way is entity. But the addition of such things in one way will make what is greater, and in another will not make anything so at all. As a surface and a line make that which is greater, but a point and a monad by no means have this effect. But since this philosopher speculates clumsily, and it happens that there is something that is indivisible, wherefore even in this way also hath one for him a certain reply as follows: an addition of this sort will not make a thing greater, but will make it more. Yet how, forsooth, from one or more than one of this kind will arise magnitude? For this is even like saying that a line is made up of points. But doubtless, if any one makes a supposition in this way, so that, as some say, from actual unity, and a something else that is not one, is composed number, not the less should it form a subject for investigation, why, and how what is produced will one time be number, and another time magnitude, if what is not one be inequality and the same nature. For neither is it manifest how from one and this nature, nor how from a certain number and this nature, magnitudes would arise. Chapter 5. But a doubt connected with these is, whether numbers and bodies and surfaces and points are certain substances or not. For if they are not, it eludes our comprehension what being is, and what the substances of entities are. For passive properties and motions and relations and dispositions and ratios do not appear to signify a substance of anything. For all these are predicated respecting a certain subject, and no one of them can be said to be this or that particular thing. But things which would seem particularly to signify substance, namely water, and earth, and fire, from which compounded bodies consist, the heats and colds of these, and such like qualities, are affections, not substances, but all the while the body, which undergoes these passive conditions alone, sustains them as a certain entity, and as being a certain substance. But truly, both body is less substance than a superficies, and this latter than a line, and this than the monad, and the point, for by these is body defined. And these indeed seem capable of existence without body, but the existence of body without these seems impossible. Wherefore the majority of speculators and our predecessors considered substance and entity to be body, and the other things to be passive properties of this, so that also the first principles, those of bodies, are the first principles of entities. Subsequent investigators, however, and they too, persons that appeared endowed with more wisdom than these, supposed such to be numbers. As, therefore, we have said, unless these are substance, there is, upon the whole, no substance in existence, nor no entity, for the accidents, at least, in these it would not truly be worthy to call entities. But if, doubtless, this is acknowledged, that dimensions and points are substance rather than bodies themselves, yet we do not perceive to what sort of bodies these would belong. For that they be inherent in things that fall under cognizance of the senses, this is impossible. In this case, then, there would not be any substance in existence. Further, however, it appears that all these entities are divisions of body, one indeed into breadth, and another into depth, and a third into length. But in addition to these things, in like manner, there is in the solid every kind of figure whatsoever, so that if neither mercury is in the stone, nor the half of a cube in the cube, in such a way as has been defined, neither in this case would one surface exist in body. For if this would be the case with anything whatsoever, it would be with that which would separate the half. Now, there is the same mode of reasoning in the case of a line, and a point, and a monad. Wherefore, if body especially be substance, and if these are substance rather than this, and these have no existence, nor do certain substances exist, there eludes our comprehension what entity is, and what is the substance of entities. For in addition to the statements that have been made, those irrational consequences relating to generation and corruption also take place. For indeed, substance, when not previously existing, it comes into existence now, or when it, which formerly had an existence, afterwards ceases to exist, the substance, I say, appears to undergo these affections, namely production and corruption. But points and lines and surfaces cannot possibly arise or be destroyed, though sometimes these have a subsistence, and sometimes they have not. For when bodies mutually touch or intersect each other at the same time that they touch, they become one, and at the same time that they intersect, they become two, so that points, lines, and surfaces, when bodies are compounded together, have no subsistence, but then have been reduced to corruption. But when bodies are divided, these rise into existence, though previously they had no existence. For a point, truly, that is indivisible is not capable of being divided into two, and if they are produced and destroyed, they are produced from something. But in a similar way is it the case respecting the present time, which is contained in duration, for neither does this admit of being generated and destroyed, but nevertheless invariably seems to be a thing that is different, not that it is, however, any particular substance. In like manner, also, it is evident that it is the case both respecting points, and lines, and surfaces, for the reasoning is the same, for all these, in like manner, are either bounds or divisions. Chapter 6. But upon the whole, would one feel perplexity, why also it is necessary to investigate into certain other entities besides sensibles and media, for example, such as we posit as forms? For if it is on this account, because mathematical entities indeed differ from those that are here in a certain other respect, yet in regard of there being many of them of the same species, there is no difference in this. Wherefore, the first principles of these will not be limited in number, as neither of all the lines which are here are the first principles limited in number, but in species, unless one takes the principle of this particular syllable, or of this particular voice, and the first principles of these will be limited in number. In like manner also is it the case with things that are intermediate, for there, likewise, things of the same species are infinite. Wherefore, unless, in addition to sensibles and mathematical entities, there are certain others, such as some call the forms, there will not be a substance, one in number and species, nor will there be certain first principles of entities, so many in number, but in species. If, then, this is necessary, the subsistence of forms on this account is necessary also. For even although they who make such assertions do not propound their theories with distinctness, yet it is this which they aim at, and they must needs affirm this, that each of the forms is a certain substance, and that not one of them subsists according to accident. But, doubtless, if we posit the existence of the forms, and of the first principles, as one in number, but not in species, we have declared the impossibilities which must need come to pass. Contiguous also to this inquiry is the question whether elements subsist in potentiality, or in some other manner. For if, indeed, in some other manner, there will be something else that is prior to first principles, for potentiality is prior to that cause. But it is not necessary that everything that is potential should be disposed in that way. But if elements are existent in potentiality, it is admissible that none of the entities should have a subsistence, for it is possible for that to exist which not as yet has any existence. For indeed, that which has no existence is being produced, but nothing of things that are impotential is produced. And these doubts, then, is it necessary to moot respecting first principles. And there remains also the inquiry whether universals exist, or, as we say, singulars. For if indeed universals exist, they will not be substances, for not of those things that are general signify this particular thing, but a thing of such a sort. But the substance is this particular thing. But if it will be possible to exhibit this particular thing, and that which thereof may in common be predicated, in such a case many animals will Socrates himself be, and man and animal, if each signify this certain particular thing, and that which is one. If indeed, therefore, first principles are universal, these consequences take place. But if they are not universal, but are as singulars, they will not be objects of scientific knowledge. For the sciences are conversant about all things that are universal. Wherefore will there be different first principles prior to principles, namely, those that are predicated universally in case there is likely to be a science of them.